Alright guys, dialing in the temperature sensor on the gauge now. So what I've done is I pulled off my temperature sensor. I'm running it through my rheostat. I'm starting with just a really low amount of resistance because I don't think it needs very much. So right now I have the rheostat at around maybe 5 ohms. But essentially what I've done is I can tell by my Phytech that I'm at about 186 and my... Let me see here, where the hell are you? My temperature needle is just a smidge below half. I think 186, 185 is kind of best case scenario, but it's also really low because I've got my heat on and my fan just cycled off. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn my heat off, and what will happen, I just witnessed it kind of cycle once. As the temperature climbs up to about 194, 195, it gets just above half, and then my fan kicks on around 196, 197. At that point, the needle is a little more than half, maybe around 3/5 to 3/4-ish area. And then my fan kicks on, drops down to about 190, puts the needle right back in the middle. The reason my temperature is so low is because I had my heater on, so it was pulling more heat off, and probably the water inside of the heater core was still cold as well. So it had an extra dose of cold water, but I think I've got it pretty close. So what I'll do next, I'll pull off that rheostat that I'm using on my temperature sensor. I'll measure its resistance. Like I said, it's probably only in the 5 to 10 ohms range. I don't know exactly what it is, but it doesn't matter because all I did was I just added a little tiny bit of resistance, kind of let it run until I got to a point where I was happy. And then what I'll do is I will just use a regular ceramic resistor and measure it, duplicate it with a regular resistor, and then I'll just solder it in line so that becomes the new resistance of it. So that should dial everything in. And looks like my oil temperature, or sorry, my oil pressure is probably in a pretty good spot anyways, so I'm not going to bother trying to add resistance to my oil pressure gauge because I think it's good enough where it is. So there's that. What are we at? 194. Yeah, and you can see my temperature gauge is climbing now. It's just above half. So we'll see when my fan kicks on. My fan kicks on at 196. And I find usually I got a 195 thermostat in here as well. So usually going down the highway, my coolant temperature by the Phytech is 194, which means it'll be right about there where it's at. So now the fan will kick on in a second, and then my temperature will drop. Yeah, there it goes. You just seen the voltage drop. So my temperature gauge will drop to just below half, and then everything will be dialed in. So there we go, making progress.